B2B Forum by Marketing Profs. 5 ways to make your digital experiences accessible now. Hosted by Katie Martell with Joanne Becker and Kelsey Bronski from Perkins Access. The Perkins School for the Blind's logo on a fence with the campus in the background.
Welcome everyone to the Spring 2022 Marketing Profs B2B Forum. My name is Katie Martell. I am so delighted to be here at the Groesbeck Center in Watertown, Massachusetts with my friends at Perkins Access for a keynote conversation about accessibility. Now this is a topic that I admit I knew very little about until meeting my friends at Perkins. And that's what today is all about, is really breaking down the barriers, not only to access for our customers, but for you and I as marketers to get to know how to address the accessible needs of our audience today and every day. I'm here joined by the lovely Joanne Becker and Kelsey Bronski from Perkins Access. Hi ladies, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm delighted to be here.
We are here collectively to enhance our knowledge and evolve together, and sometimes that means asking questions that you might have been scared to ask in the past. So please use the chat, ask the questions today, because we will be back with you live to address them. Let's do some introductions first and foremost. Joanne, tell us about yourself and your role at Perkins.
I want to begin by saying that accessibility is really personal to me because it impacts my life every day. And it's also impacted the choices I've made in the career that I've chosen. I've been at Perkins for 10 years, and one of the biggest gifts in working in an organization such as Perkins and working with Perkins Access, I see the difference we make in people's lives. It's a direct experience.
Talk about impact. It's really amazing. And Kelsey, tell us about yourself and give us a little more context as to what Perkins does.
The Perkins mission is to make sure that our students are prepared for the world. And the way that Perkins Access and myself and Joanne fit into that mission is that we make sure that the world is prepared for our students. And we do that by working with organizations to improve their accessibility so that anybody, regardless of age, ability, means of access, anybody can engage with completely independently digital experiences.
I'm so grateful to have the perspective of you both, mostly because both of you, like myself, have experience in marketing, but also because I think that there's a lot of, again, overlooked audiences that we're really talking about. I want to start by orienting our audience around who we are talking about. Now, 1 in 4 US adults live with a disability. That's a big stat, that's a big number, but let's break that down a little bit. There are different buckets of disabilities that we're really talking about. Users, for example, with mobility, visual, auditory, cognitive, and other disabilities. Can you give us a quick overview of what we're talking about with these categories?
You know, it is an interesting thing. So, since I've always been blind, my disability, if you will, although I don't really see it as so much of a disability, I think sometimes society makes it a disability, but I don't experience it as such. But it's visible, and yet we have all these people in all these categories. It's not visible, and yet it's there, and these people need to be attended to just as much, and we need awareness about what these hidden or these disabilities that aren't so visible. We need to really be attentive to the population as a whole and figure out, wow, what can we do to make it easier to live on the planet?
Accessibility is something, as long as you've owned an iPhone, you've been benefiting from your entire life, and you just didn't know it. What's great about accessibility is that it makes digital experiences easier for everyone to use, and so it's all about that usability, that frictionless experience, so that there's no barriers to getting something done.
Right. Right, and that's what this is. I mean, removing friction is about creating an easy experience for all, and that's pretty much the new charter of marketers in 2022. It's about frictionless experiences for all customers. At a high level as well, we have a world in which the idea of company values is tossed around left and right. We talk a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion. What's more inclusive than addressing 1 in 4 of your potential target audience? Are you unintentionally, no marketer means to exclude their target audience, but this is an unintentional exclusion that happens. So at a high level, and Joanne, we'll start with you here, tell us about some of the ways that you navigate the world that you wish more people, especially in marketing, would understand.
Well, Kelsey mentioned an iPhone. So I, of course, have to say that this is a device that 15 years ago, if somebody would say to me, you're going to use a flat screen, and obviously since I'm blind, I'm not going to see the flat screen, I would have thought, no, 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 that's not really happening. I would say of all the devices that I use, probably the most important technology I have is my iPhone. And it's so interesting because this is a product, I buy it just like you buy your iPhones. I don't have to buy special software. I don't have to buy a screen reader to put on it. What is wonderful about iPhones is that Apple has actually thought about accessibility in a really profound way. So even though most people aren't aware of this, if you go into settings and you see accessibility, you're going to see that Apple has thought about accessibility, not just for blind people, for people with hearing loss, for people with motor issues. This is really a profound effort.
And it works right out of the box, you told me before.
Right out of the box. And all these apps, the reason I think that that Apple really does have the majority of blind people and visually impaired people buying its product is because also the apps are much more accessible. And so we respond to that. And I know with blind people, often there is really high unemployment, but it's fascinating to me that when it's a product that matters as much as iPhones do, we spend the money. We make sure that we're going to get a product that's really going to help us out. So we're good consumers.
Well, I have proof to that as if we needed it. You should just trust everything Joanne says, but in case you don't, people with disabilities spend $1.2 trillion with a T annually. Any other examples, again, of experiences that you've got, or Kelsey, for experiences that you know about, that you wish more people understood about navigating this world, kind of common barriers to access? I know for me, one thing I learned about through Perkins was the idea of a curb cut and the curb cut effect. You want to walk us through that one?
Absolutely. So I think it's hard to visualize what a barrier is, especially when we're talking about a digital barrier. It gets really abstract and it's like, what are we even talking about?
Right.
But when you visualize walking on the sidewalk and you're at an intersection and there's a curb, that curb is a physical barrier for someone in a wheelchair, someone pushing a stroller, someone who's on a bike, someone rolling a suitcase, someone delivering groceries to a grocery store, so many situations. So that's a barrier. And those barriers have, over the past 30 years, started to be removed through curb cuts. And curb cuts help anyone in any of those situations, but they're really created for people who are in wheelchairs. But the benefit of them is vast and wide.
And isn't it brilliant if they design it when they're planning the new construct, whatever it is, if they include it so they don't have to think about it after the fact. And that's when it becomes more expensive, when it's an afterthought and, oh gosh, we should have put it curb cut, but we didn't. Right. So now we have to go back and do it. So that's why thinking about this from the very start of a project is so important.
One of the most universal things I think everyone's going through right now, because of the pandemic, there's been a lot of rebranding, a lot of marketers changing jobs. It is new website season. It is like the season of new websites. It's a great time right now to be thinking about how users with disabilities access our websites. So Joanne, can I ask you a personal question? How do you navigate a website?
I use a computer. I have both a Mac and a PC. Now, if it's a Mac computer, again, the accessibility is built in. So it has VoiceOver. The screen reader that I use on my iPhone is available on the Mac. On a PC, and that's actually my preference for most of the work that I do on a computer. I love using Windows. I do buy a screen reader, and what that involves is buying software, installing it on my computer, and all the print that, if you're sighted, you see all that print appearing on the monitor. My screen reader reads it aloud in synthetic speech.
Twitter, profile, @PerkinsVision, profile photo, Perkins School for the Blind, button, Perkins School for the Blind, @PerkinsVision, button. Hashtag diet that hashtag Laura Bridgman, the first hashtag deafblind student to significantly learn English, was an inspiration to hashtag Charles Dickens. Charles was inspired to write about Laura in his book American Notes. Learn more, perkins.org/Laura Bridgman. Hashtag Women's History Month. Hashtag W. Portrait of Laura Bridgman wearing a blindfold with an image of handwritten letters behind her. Below is the text. Did you know? Laura Bridgman became a global celebrity after inspiring Charles Dickens to write about her accomplishments. Hashtag Women's History Month and the Perkins logo. Image.
When you talk about designing web pages, all I can say with real desperation in my heart, please, as you're designing this, think about people that use screen readers, because it can be such a nightmare trying to navigate a website. If you're sighted, as a case in point, you can look at the screen and you say, oh yeah, that's the title of the page. If you're blind and you're using a screen reader, I have no idea unless I use a special keystroke to hear what the title of the page is. And then, if you're sighted, you can probably look and identify what you think would be most important on that web page, but I'm not able to do that. So I don't want to have to listen to chatter nonstop as it's reading all the content. So with the screen reader, I'm able to pull up a list of links, and I can hear by links what might be interesting. I can move by headings, but often people don't design their website thinking about using headings, and they can be so valuable. And there are ways in which I have great keystrokes that I can use to help me quickly navigate websites, but again, the accessibility has to be part of the design.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's one of the big learnings for myself too. I didn't learn what a screen reader even was.
Right, of course, right.
And that's part of this learning process. And Kelsey actually was one of the first people I asked, well, what does that mean for me then making a website? What do I have to keep in mind as a marketer?
A lot. You better.
Tell us.
Well, I think that you brought up a really great point about a redesign. As a marketer, I know that when you want to change a logo or your branding or a color, there are a lot of hoops to jump through. But when you're in a redesign, you have the opportunity to do a lot of those things. And so accessibility is key to build it in throughout your whole process from the very beginning conceptual stages. There are accessibility considerations that you can make then. You want to really make sure that the colors you're using have enough contrast throughout your site. And so when you're setting your page types and you've got your titles and your headers and your fonts and all of that, you want to make sure that there's appropriate color contrast, because for someone who's low vision or has other visual disabilities, that's really, really important. When we're talking about color contrast, maybe it doesn't seem like that high stakes, but if the contrast is poor on a call to action button or a form field or something that's really critical to your business, then there are going to be people who are completely blocked from participating and from purchasing your services and from learning more.
When you mention color in reference to buttons or form fields, this is such an astonishing story. So I was working with a gentleman who needed to learn how to use Peapod, and he was doing really well. He was filling out the forms correctly, and he could not he figured out all the items that he wanted. The check boxes seemed to work. Then it came time, and I said, okay, so you're ready for the checkout button. Yeah, and there's a special command. It's B for button. You press it, and it takes you to the button. But guess what? The button wasn't labeled. So after going through this whole process of teaching him how to use Peapod and going through all this checklist of what he wanted and reading about what he wanted, I said, wait, that can't be true. I know something's gone. I couldn't believe, I actually got the man who drove me to his home, my driver, I called him and I said, could you please come in here and tell me, is there a way to check out this webpage, or is it just not there? He said, no, there's a big red button there. But it was totally not labeled. So there was no way, unless Al took a mouse and click on it, otherwise he couldn't have made that order. So that's a perfect example.
Making it harder for people to buy from you. Not great marketing. Not a good idea.
No.
And you brought something else up for me, Joanne, when you said a red button. So when color contrast is huge, but color, another consideration is people who are colorblind and what colors you're using when and how you're using them. And it's 1 in 12 men are colorblind, and 1 in 200 women, which is a lot of people. And so if you're using red as your notification that there's a required field on a form and you need to fill it out, that person knows that the form's not going through, but they can't see why it's not going through. If you have a matrix on your website that's showing, here's our 3 offerings and here are the differences between them, and you're using a green X and a red check, that can be problematic too. They could all just look gray. So I think it's really important how vast this is. We don't expect everyone to become experts, but we do expect everyone to become at least champions of accessibility. And what I mean by being an accessibility champion is someone who learns about accessibility, cares about it, wants to push it forward at their organization, and really helps make it a core value. And when it's a core value at your organization, it has a budget, it has a plan, it has goals, it has check-ins, and I think those are the champions that we love working with, and I think it's going to bring your organization to the next level.
Definitely.
I mean, it's great to say, yes, I want to champion this and not provide any structure for actually making that happen. That's where it becomes problematic. And in the end, it's just good business. I mean, look at all this business that you're losing by not having it accessible.
If it wasn't good business, Apple wouldn't be doing it.
Oh gosh.
And what we're talking about are not major changes. These are actually really, I hate to say it, easy shifts to make as marketers. That's why we're here. This is not outside of our grasp. I'd love to help our audience with a couple more specific examples. What is it like then to navigate a video as somebody with a disability? And what do marketers have to do to make sure that's accessible?
Captions are absolutely key for videos, and having your caption file and a transcript, that's something that's searchable. So if you over the course of your video have certain keywords and you're telling someone how to do something or to learn more, that will only help more people see your video. But for anyone who wants to read what's being said, or people who learn better from reading than from listening and watching, having that option is really, really important. And audio description is another important factor for videos.
So what audio description does, it actually is this brilliant process. So when there's silence, I don't know what's going on, and somebody will brilliantly describe, not too much detail, just enough, what is happening. Or they'll even give me a facial expression like, she turned and looked troubled, or she, even such subtle details, but these subtle details are what I love because it just helps me understand much more about the plot. And if it's done well, it's done brilliantly. During the pandemic, what happened? Everybody started watching Netflix, and they would speak to me about, oh, have you seen this? Have you seen that? So all of a sudden, I turned on Netflix, and I did have it turned on with accessibility. So all of these programs that heretofore, they would not have been audio described, have been so brilliantly audio described. I don't miss a thing. I mean, that's my experience. I don't know if I were sighted, maybe I'd think differently. But to watch The Queen's Gambit, I mean, I watched that and I was as enthralled with that program as anybody sighted. And how they could audio describe that so brilliantly, it's really mind-boggling to me.
And this is something I actually would love if everyone here kind of took time. I'm giving you all homework today. Go watch The Queen's Gambit, turn on the audio description. It really is an amazing way to experience what makes something more accessible.
At night, she looks up at the ceiling from her bed. Pieces move around the giant upside-down chessboard. Check. Beth tries the basement door on a new day. It remains locked. Mate. She slaps the erasers against the door, leaving chalk marks behind.
There are so many videos that are just visual montages that have no audio, besides maybe some peppy music. Right. And so what is the point of this video? There's no point to someone who can't see the video or to someone who is distracted while watching it. I mean, Joanne, if you clicked on a video and it was just music playing, would you think you were even on the right video?
Exactly, but that happens all of the time, right? You go to something, I think, on YouTube, and it's just music and no description. Another example of audio description, I know this sounds completely crazy. My favorite sport is figure skating. It makes no sense. It really makes no sense. But for the first time, the Winter Olympics had audio description of figure skating.
This year.
I was in like seventh heaven. I mean, you know, the death spiral, the camel spin, the triple Salchow. I mean, they were just describing these things, and it's the first time I've ever had it described. Man, I love Tommy. I love Johnny Weir, and I love his descriptions. But I mean, this was, in addition to him, a woman was actually describing what they were doing. It was
wow. And this was the first Olympics that you've had that experience.
Yes.
And for a huge event like that on a world stage, to be including accessibility is really important towards raising awareness about what accessibility is, who it helps, and what the benefits are for groups of people that really, Joanne loves figure skating, and it's now become the true fulfilling experience that it should be, because she has access to audio description. And I am seeing more and more organizations put accessibility at center stage. The inauguration for President Biden, because it was virtual in some aspects, and it was very different because of COVID. There were many considerations that went into it, and they were really committed to accessibility. It's something Perkins Access worked with them on, and they had many elements like audio description, like captions, like ASL interpreters that really brought a country at home and apart together. And I think another great tip is alt text. And
yes, please, can we dig into alt text? This is one of those very misunderstood parts of I think when you're posting an image to social media, when you're putting an image anywhere. I think a lot of us have heard alt text, but don't exactly know what good alt text looks like. So what is it first and foremost, and how do marketers not mess it up?
When you're adding content to your website, you're creating a social post, there is a place to add alt text, which is going to go into the code so that when Joanne's using a screen reader and she comes across an image as she's navigating a web page, that image description will be read to Joanne. But if it's an image, you know, if it's on your homepage and it's a picture of you, then it's
very important.
The description could say, depending on what the image is trying to get across and how you want to represent it, it could say something as simple as Katie Martell. It could say Katie Martell headshot, or it could say host and MC Katie Martell in a bright red blazer with a floral background and disco ball.
Joanne, that really is my headshot, by the way. It's fantastic.
And so it just depends on the level of detail and the meaning of the photo. You start with what is the meaning of the photo, and you put the most important details first. And it should be short and concise. And you don't need to say a picture of, a photo of, image of. You just say what the point of the photo is. And there's a lot of resources out there about alt text that you can just search. On your social posts, it's available to put alt text across social platforms. And it's great for SEO.
So let's talk about social media, because I know that, for me at least, I like to hashtag pretty much everything. I'm like the kind of person that put hashtags in texting. Talk to me about how to make my social posts more accessible.
There are a couple of tips, very easy. I promise you can do these on all of your posts. It won't take extra time, thought, and it will just make them that much better for everybody. So when it comes to hashtags, the rule is to capitalize the first letter of each word. So if it was hashtag marketing profs, it would be capital M, marketing profs, the P would be capitalized. And it just makes it easier to read. That's for people with low vision, people with cognitive disabilities. And another tip with social media is emojis. And emojis are maybe overused in some tweets or some posts, But my rule of thumb is to save the emojis for the end of the post. And the reason for that is when they're spaced in between words and things like that, it's just very distracting and takes away from the point of what you're trying to say. So if you had the clapping hands emoji between different words on your post, like if you said best clapping hands emoji day, clapping hands emoji ever, clapping hands emoji, like I'm having trouble remembering what phrase I just said because you're hearing all of those emojis read aloud over and over again.
You're saying if it's a screen reader, then reading
Yeah, if
the
it's
tweet,
a screen reader reading the emoji. So if they're at the end of the post, that's better than having them all throughout.
Right.
So what I do is I capitalize for the hashtags and I save the emojis for the end and I add alt text. And if it's a video, I make sure it has captions or that I'm putting captions in through the platform. Like LinkedIn lets you upload your video and upload your caption file.
As does Twitter, YouTube does this. It's more accessible than you think to make things accessible. That should be on a t-shirt, I think. I know Forms is a big universal shared experience. Who here doesn't have many, many forms going right now collecting info? They are often a culprit of inaccessible digital experiences. Joanne, why do you hate forms?
Often I have no idea what information and where I'm supposed to put it. If the form isn't labeled correctly, I have no idea. Often it'll say form field and form field, but I don't know what content they want in that particular form field. And then when I complete thinking, well, I'll guess and I'll put my name, address, then I find out when I submit it, no, it wasn't correct. They wanted it in some other order. And it's a guessing game. It's so frustrating.
And
So
what changes that? Is this a label on
all
the
you
field?
have to do is label the form field. Say first name, then the form field. Last name, form field. Just label what they are. Just like when you're going to label the button so that it's a button that's really there and visible for the screen reader, the same thing with the form fields. It just has to be labeled.
Yep.
And I'm sure you've seen different ways of labeling forms, whether it's in the field box or it's above or it disappears. What we love and recommend at Perkins Access is floating labels. And what those are is they're right above that entry box and they don't go away, they don't disappear.
Right.
And that is really helpful for someone
Right.
to complete the form. What you can do to make it easier for everyone to submit forms is you can have autofill capability on your form so that if someone has their information saved on their phone or their computer, with one click of a button, they can complete the entire form. And I think lastly, like Joanne said, labeling a button, well, your entry button needs to have proper contrast. It needs to be labeled as a button, and that way once someone's gone through the effort of filling out your form, they can submit it and know that it has gone through and they're all set.
Right, right. And that's what we want at the end of the day. Our forms filled, our checkouts checked out of, and people to have a frictionless experience. One thing I know of, there are tools, many tools out there that claim to, with the click of a button and the swipe of your credit card and $13.99 a month, give you a fully accessible website. Sounds too good to be true.
Please don't do that. As someone who has experienced their overlays and they claim to make this website accessible, and it's just not the case. And in fact, sometimes it makes it really difficult to even navigate the website. When you might see, or at least I hear with my screen reader, it says press Alt-1 if you use a screen reader. And then it changes somehow the content on that page according to my screen reader, and often it makes it more complicated. I don't know what exactly has taken place that makes it that way, but it's not the case that it's making it a fully accessible experience. In fact, I know blind people that have had to choose ad blockers so they can avoid overlays on web pages and websites. So it's too easy to be true, and it's the case. It's just not the way that we're going to find accessible websites.
And I think as a marketer, you know what sort of messages are genuine and heartfelt and truthful. And when you hear something like one line of code can make your entire website accessible, I think your antennas go straight up. Like, how could that be possible? I mean, if you said to your CIO, oh, one line of code can make our website secure. No, that's not
He'd laugh you out of the
possible, and
room.
it's really not in the spirit of being inclusive. Trying to make, and accessibility is not a problem, it's really an opportunity, but trying to make something go away with taking it off your mind and just saying, well, we signed up for this and we're paying every month and we have one line of code and we're accessible, that's not really in the spirit of being inclusive, and you're really not benefiting anyone. In fact, you're making it harder.
And I'm so glad you used the word opportunity, because that is what this is. This is not a problem that we should feel shame about, that we have to go fix with our tails between our legs. This is an opportunity to improve how we show up for all the various folks in our audience. That's an ongoing journey, and as a part of that journey, it requires us to learn. Great marketers are always on a learning journey because this field never slows down, it's always changing. This is part of that. Today's talk has been part of that, but in general, there's a lot to learn about the world of accessibility. There are web content accessibility guidelines. What do y'all call it? WCAG?
WCAG.
WCAG.
And WC3.
Yep.
Yes.
There's a ton of resources to kind of guide organizations through what's required. And by the way, there is a financial and legal risk to not doing this. Since 2017, digital accessibility lawsuits have increased 571%. So like, yeah, there's probably like a reason to do it that your CFO will care about, but it's also just the right thing to do. And the more you learn about this, the more I hope you realize this is something that we can add to the repertoire.
One thing I would say, as somebody working with Perkins Access, the other thing you get when you contact us is you get user testing. So it's one thing to talk about whether or not the standards are working in your website, its design, but really what you want is that website to be functional and usable for the end user, and that's what we can ensure you that you'll receive when you are in contact with us.
And it really is just about going and getting curious, right? I hope that today we've given you a lot to be curious about, some tips to help, but there's only so much we can cover in a half-hour talk. So honestly, I really thank you both for bringing this perspective. Is there anything I haven't asked you about or that you want to share as far as what folks need to know to really start to take steps in this journey towards truly accessible digital experiences?
I think it matters so much to have curiosity and interest, and when you realize that really we are good consumers, when you find it possible to have us actually access your information, and if we're able to use your products, we'll be there.
Cha-ching.
Yeah.
And I think I'd love to just reiterate why people should do this. I think because it's the right thing to do and it's good business, sometimes that's not how you convince your CEO to make it a core value of your organization. And so, and if you're not making progress in accessibility, you're leaving a lot of money on the table, because it is a baseline requirement for many, many organizations now. And I just was listening in on a Forrester webinar where an analyst said that in 2022 alone, 10 billion in design services will go towards accessible organizations.
I wish we could talk all day about this, truly, because I know there's so much to unpack. But I think if anything today, hopefully we've helped you all understand that accessibility is not only the right thing to do, it's easier than we think, and it really is within our grasp. So thank you both for sitting down with me today. Joanne, Kelsey, thank you so much. And if you don't know Perkins Access, now you do, and I hope that you consider them a partner in your journey. If it was good enough for the inauguration, it's good enough for your business. And I'm really grateful to my guests today for joining me. But now we're going to time travel to the future, where we're going to answer your questions in real time. So please ask them, and back to you, Anne, in the future.
Welcome to the future, which is the present. It's very confusing.
I thought you might like that, Anne.
I did. I appreciated that. I was like, wow, this is, in fact. Thank you so much, Kelsey and Joanne. That was just, I actually learned a lot just from listening to you today. So I really appreciate you being here and sharing all of your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you, Katie. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say we're here on the Perkins campus in Watertown, and I know we're nearby Katie over in Newton, so I'll let you take it away, Katie.
I think we've got some great questions and not a lot of time to get to them. So, Anne, anything stand out to you for Q&A?
Yeah, actually, one question that I had that was voted up was, so who do you typically work with? Within an organization, can you tell us like which role or which department tends to own accessibility?
So it definitely depends on the organization, but often it's people in digital roles. So people who are designers, developers, or the digital marketing team. It just kind of depends on who owns your website, which department owns your apps, your websites, and things like that. Once in a while, it's through the legal department because it is a legal risk, but very often it's the digital team is who we're working with on the day-to-day basis.
Got it.
But
and so much of the stuff can be.
Well, I was just going to add, accessibility is something, it's really not one person's job. There's different people across the organization through all different departments: HR, marketing, legal, digital, IT, procurement. It's really an organization-wide effort, but those are usually the first people coming to us because they want to fix their websites and make them work for everyone.
Got it.
Yeah, and I was going to jump in and just say there's a lot we can do as marketers to just start to make some little tweaks in what we do every day. Every time you now put an image on social media, I know everyone here is going to think about alt text. And I do a lot of video in my work. I don't do anything without captions anymore. So we're just planting seeds today. But what we really hope is that we've created a few accessibility champions. So you start to see this as kind of something you can steward in the organization that will then impact the whole organization. I hope we made clear that accessibility is better for all users, not just those with disabilities.
And the more people understand about the importance of accessibility, I think it's going to be something that blossoms. Often people have no idea. They don't even know what a screen reader is. They don't think about any kind of disability when they're actually designing. And now perhaps people who are introduced to this concept of making a website accessible or making content accessible will really be thinking about that and not excluding it in the design development.
Yeah, I really love what Mona says here too, just about, she says that this session/recording is in itself a whole case study on why to include accessibility in B2B marketing. So yeah, this will be on demand as of Friday, I think it is. Julie can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. But share it with your team. Start having those conversations internally.
And I want to thank you for having closed captioning at this year's event. What a wonderful way to live those values, and show it. And it's something that we all kind of have to start to embrace. It's a journey, and it doesn't matter where you are in that journey. If today's day one, great. Welcome to the party. We're excited to have you. And I got to say, Perkins Access makes this really, it makes it easy. They really do clarify those really extensive guidelines. There's a lot of detail in the web content accessibility guidelines. It can be a little overwhelming. So I do recommend reaching out to them. They are a nonprofit dedicated to this, just bridging the gap between what we create with digital and all the users that tend to be overlooked, especially with well-intentioned marketers trying to do a lot, get a lot done. I would love to ask Joanne and Kelsey, if there's one thing everyone can start to do today, what would it be? If there's one tip to leave everybody with?
I think the awareness that there needs to be, I guess my thought is when you're thinking about design, inclusion, thinking about accessibility, that would be the one thing.
I think for me, if you haven't heard about accessibility and you haven't talked about it within your organization, I think that my one thing would be kind of start having conversations about accessibility, start talking to some different people in your department, in different departments, and kind of bring it up and say, like, let's kind of dig into this together and see what we can do, because I think it's going to make a big impact.
Katie, can I jump in with mine? So my takeaway from today is that I think we need to start manufacturing t-shirts. We need to start producing t-shirts with Katie's quote. It's more accessible than you think to make something accessible. Genius. It's like she's a marketer.
It's so true though. And you all know me. I'm somebody who's really invested in DEI and diversity, equity, inclusion. And accessibility was not even on my radar until recently. This is like no shame. This is just something that doesn't get talked about a lot. But like I said, the UN says that people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the world. 1 in 4 adults in the US. These are people that we need to advocate for because they are in our audience. But like I said, this is a journey. Kelsey, Joanne, thank you so much for breaking it down and making it easy for us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It was delightful.
Yes, thank you both for being here. Thank you so much to you, Katie, for your for being here as well, and for facilitating the conversation today. And I really need to give a shout out to my dog Augie, who did not bark once throughout this entire presentation. You know, great information, not interrupted. What else can you expect?
Augie needs a treat.
Thank you. Contact Perkins Access by email at access@perkins.org and at Perkins_access on Twitter.
Queer videography.